So, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban for the PS2. It's better than the second game, I suppose. Okay, review's over, bye. Okay, so the review needs to be longer than that, but honestly, there isn't a whole lot to say. For a game that makes so many changes to the formula, there's some serious deja vu going on here. Overall, it's not nearly as grating of a game as the previous iteration, but I still believe the problems it has are equally as severe. They just don't matter quite as much. So before we get into it, let's hammer out the basics. The American release for The Prisoner of Azkaban on the PS2 was June 2nd of 2004. This particular version was created by the generically coined EA UK. It sits firmly in the equally non-specific genre of action-adventure, with no real emphasis on any specific style of mechanics. This time, it's a Zelda game if you controlled 3 characters! The story runs through the events of Harry's 3rd year at Hogwarts, where Sirius Black is... I don't even know why I'm wasting my breath explaining this. The game spends next to no time on the real plot, instead once again leaving you to... Never mind. I'll get to that when it's appropriate. You know what? I'll just sum it up like the game does. Sirius Black is a dogman man-dog. He wants to kill Harry, but not really. Lupin is a werewolf, Scabbers a scum, Malfoy is a punk, Dementors are weak to chocolate and ghost steer, Dumbledore magic, time travel, the end. If the game doesn't care, why should I? They don't even show Hermione punching Malfoy. I mean, come on, that's the best part. This game encompasses most everything presented in the previous games, although there are some additions. To start, you now control Harry, Hermione, and Ron. Each of them learns their own spells and has their own unique abilities. Harry can platform through levels and has the Marauder's map to help him sneak at night. Ron has distraction items, and Hermione can fit into small places that others can't, even though her character model is no smaller than the others. The game is once again broken up into different dungeons, most of which are still part of going to class. What is it with this series and focusing on making gameplay about the mundane sections of the story? If I was playing The Sims Harry Potter edition, that would be fine. But this is supposed to be a game that follows the fantastical plot of the books and the movies. Why are my most dangerous adventures taking place in class? Is this series trying to reveal some secret plot hidden within the books, showcasing how each of the teachers is secretly a Death Eater trying to kill Harry? If not, then why are he and his friends the only ones ever sent into perilous dungeons to do battle with all manner of monsters, extreme conditions, and bottomless pits? Anyway, the dungeons are structured much the same here as before. The only difference is that the puzzles now center around specific mechanics to certain characters. Hermione can freeze things, Harry can cross gaps, and Ron shines lights on hinky punks. I think Ron got the raw end of the deal here. He's not useful, but you use the other two much more often. Regardless, that's about it that's new. Things are still separated into days, although there isn't a night section for every day now. Fred and George's shop is still practically useless unless you're a completionist, and many of the side quests are the same sort of things that you got in the second game. They even brought back the Lost and Found game. Who played that? I suppose there are a few other new mechanics. You can ride Buckbeak, the hippogriff, but he's slow and difficult to control, and you only use him a handful of times, so it's not really what I would consider a new mechanic. There's some mini games you can play, including some that use the PlayStation iToy peripheral, but I don't have an iToy, so I thankfully can't comment on those. Oh, and there's no Quidditch anymore. Why? I don't know. On to the gameplay. To begin, there are even fewer options than before. You can't even adjust whether the camera controls on foot are reversed or not now. Thankfully, that doesn't really get in the way here. I can't recall whether the game uses fixed camera positions anymore or not. Regardless, I check that off as a good thing in my book, because even if they were there, the fact that I didn't notice them at all means they didn't get in the way. Basic controls seem to be yet more sluggish, but the game as a whole seems to take less cheap shots at the player, so that doesn't matter much either. One thing that I only just pinned down when playing this game that annoyed me all the way through the series, however, is the wind-up and the cooldown on some animations. A lot of simple things become overly frustrating simply due to animations that aren't cut short in places where speed and precise control is more important than looking pretty. Just positioning yourself for a jump can be a pain. as can simply trying to move your character around a box to push it from a different side. Targeting is totally broken this time. It just is. Your characters seem to wildly throw spells at strange angles, meaning you often have to be at just the right distance from your enemy, or your attack will just fly right by. It's just really difficult to be clean and strategic with the system used here, meaning you eventually just start mashing buttons until things around you start dying. But what's worse is that lock-on is now directly controlled by the direction your camera is facing, it seems. Instead of locking on to the closest enemy, you now lock on to the enemy closest to the direction your camera is facing. So you can no longer look around at other enemies who are halfway across the room while trying to shoot at something directly in front of you. It makes crowd control terribly difficult. But most checkpoints are so forgiving that it just doesn't matter. You'll start after each failure with full health, so you can just sort of muscle your way through most everything. Stealth sections are done about as well as you would expect. They're sort of just basic puzzles, but the camera doesn't get in your way like before, so you always feel like you have an adequate amount of information to progress past obstacles. I don't exactly understand why I only barely had a bit more fun with this game than the second one. It has problems the last game didn't have, but it also fixed a lot of the core issues. I think it just comes down to the terribly empty delivery. This game doesn't seem to care about what it has me doing, so why should I? I wanted to comment on the fairly terrible final boss, and the poorly thought out Dementor dodging Carpe Retractum puzzle room in the middle of the game. But in the end, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't feel like anything you're doing in this game matters. Part of the reason for this comes down to the story. Once again, most of the game is filler, and the main story seems to take a backseat to dungeon crawling during class. I seriously don't understand who thought this was a good enough idea for a single game, let alone 2 in a row. It doesn't work well as a companion to the movie, and it genuinely seems like the game is trying as hard as it can to fast forward over major plot points. Why could they not have incorporated at least a handful of the dungeons into the actual plot? Or why not go for an entirely different design altogether, so that they could avoid wasting the player's time? Nothing gets done in this game, and you're therefore extremely to feel like you've accomplished nothing by the end of the game.
It's okay. I'm alright. Okay then, you keep him busy.
Voice acting is surprisingly on point for none of the voice actors being their movie counterparts. They honestly sound eerily similar to the actual actors. Sound design as a whole is about the same as it was the last few times otherwise. It recycles the same music, once again with a few new tracks that fit perfectly. Graphically, it looks better than ever. Even though the school grounds are completely empty to the point of looking unfinished, they look good. Character models express emotion better than ever, and animations are about as stiff as last time. Seriously, one thing that annoys me, however. Hermione's character model is the same size as Ron and Harry, but they pretend she's smaller. They claim she's the only one who can fit through small gaps, and want you to believe it without any reason to believe it other than that they say so. They even skip animations that would otherwise show her crawling through small spaces, because in reality she's not small enough. That's just lazy. It's just lazy. In the end, this game is probably a step up from the second game. I can't really tell, because it was so boring so much of the time. At least the problems here just resign you to button mashing rather than controller smashing, but they should have never existed in the first place if they didn't exist in the previous games. It's a game worth checking out only if you really want to see the progression of the series firsthand.